I'm John Stevens. I'm the senior pastor here at Chapelwood United Methodist Church. This is Sean Duffin. He's the senior pastor at Memorial Drive United Methodist Church. This thing came together really quick. We just decided as a church we wanted to provide some resources the best we could to the community, and by teaming up together, Memorial Drive and Chapelwood, it has more of a community-wide feel to it that we're all in this together. This is something that is deeply disturbing and tragic and horrific, the floods and all the families that have been impacted, those who have lost children, those who have children that survived and now they're dealing with the fallout and the trauma. So what we're trying to do here is just be a resource bank. So I'm going to talk a little bit after we open with prayer, like what our purpose is here. We are recording this, and we are going to be able to use it because I know the time of the year, there's a lot of folks who may want to use or benefit from what will be offered, but they're not able to be here because of all that's going on. So we wanted to be able to use that as a resource as well. So I'm going to ask Sean to begin with prayer, and then I'll give us a few kind of housekeeping announcements.
Thanks, John. Let's pray. God, we are gathered acutely aware that we need you. We need your grace. We need your strength. We need your courage. We need your peace. And God, we're grateful that you don't withhold those things, but that you share them freely. So God, in this time together, pour out your grace upon us that we might receive from you all that we need. Lord, equip us with words, with actions, with ways of thinking for how we might deal or lead others that we love through these next days, weeks, months, and years. Lord, we know that you will lead the way, and so we pray for the courage to follow. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Sean. Just a few housekeeping notes tonight. So the purpose of this gathering tonight not only is to invite you into this space and to provide a safe space, but also to record this for those who are not able to be with us, and to hear from some experts as we think about how we talk about tragedy and grief and loss with our children and our teenagers and even with other adults. And so there are going to be questions, and already have. I've received a lot of those. Tonight we're going to be talking a lot about the what and the how questions. There are also a lot of why questions. And those why questions get into a lot of other things. And so tonight, as we talk about this, we're going to try to keep it focused on the things that can be helpful as we're talking to our children and to our teenagers and to other adults. The theological questions, I always say to people, if you are a member of this church or not a member of this church, we have pastors here from Chapelwood and Memorial Drive. Maybe you attend a church, and I encourage you to talk to your faith leader about this, because even within the Christian tradition, there's going to be different ways of understanding how God does or where God is. And so we want to be as helpful as we can to you in that. And we want you to also know that feel free to reach out to your faith leaders as well. I'm grateful for the partnership with Memorial Drive as we collaborate together. Tomorrow night, they are going to be hosting a prayer vigil and worship service that's designed for the whole family, so children can be involved as well. That'll be at 5:30 at Memorial Drive United Methodist Church. We both have a page. Memorial Drive has it at mdumc.org/resources. We have it at chapelwood.org/resources. It has not only the podcast with Dr. Forster, it's going to have tonight's video. It's got a list of counselors and therapists. It's got prayer resources, and there will be more information that will be added there as well. When we conclude the session in here, we're going to keep the sanctuary open for people who may want to stay and pray, and there will be some pastors in here. If you'd like for one of us to pray with you, we'll be glad to do that. If not, and you just want to sit in some silence and prayer, we hope that you will feel free to do that. And when I dismiss us at the end, I'll ask us to dismiss in silence. I'll direct you out this door over here for those of you who'd like to stay and visit in the fellowship hall. We will have some other crisis counselors and personnel and staff from SBISD who are here that have graciously volunteered to come and be here. So even if you just want to talk, even if you want to just debrief, you want to ask questions, or just kind of hear and sense maybe how they're going to be working with kids as we go into the fall, I encourage you to go over there into the fellowship hall, and we'll give you some direction with that as well. The last thing is you do have an opportunity throughout this whole session to text questions that you may have for Michelle and Donna on the panel. And so if you do have questions you'd like to ask, I'll be monitoring those over here. text them to the number that you see on the screen. Just put that up in your text thread and send your question. I think that covers all of the housekeeping stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our executive pastors, Dr. Matt Russell, and he is going to introduce our speakers, and he's going to sort of lead us through this time together. So let's welcome our guests with us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm so glad that you're here. I want to introduce both Donna and Dr. Forrester tonight, and I'll read a bit of their bios. They're pretty long and they're pretty distinguished, so I'm only going to kind of butcher it if that's okay.
Don't do that.
All right.
No.
All right. Donna is a member of this church, our church, and I've known Donna for a long, long time. And she's a licensed clinical social worker and has been with community schools in Houston for over 21 years. She has a private practice and she counsels with clients of all ages for grief and loss and depression and anxiety. You co-facilitate an ongoing grief and loss support group here at the church and have done that at this church for a long time. And work with teens and adolescents of all kind of places along their own development and mental health. And so we're delighted that you're here today.
Thank you,
Donna.
Matt.
So yeah, thank you. And Dr. Michelle Forrester received her PhD from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles in 1993. She completed her postdoctoral training in early childhood center in the Department of Psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, at the Department of Pediatrics at University of California, UCLA. And she came to Houston in 95, where she originated the early childhood programs at the Learning Support Center for Child Psychology at Texas Children's Hospital. And she directed a variety of services for young children and families, including group therapy, individual play therapy, family therapy, parent training, and a teacher training program for preschoolers and early childhood specialists, in addition to clinical programs for young children and families. And she has an extensive private practice as well, and the expertise with early childhood issues such as anxiety, depression, attachment disorders, attention deficit behavioral problems, particular expertise in the area of international adoption. And I've known Dr. Forrester for a long time too, and it's just amazing that we have these kind of resources in this community. And so we're delighted that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
The questions I'm going to ask come from parents and members of of our community, not just Chapelwood, but the Spring Branch Houston community. And there's a lot of the folks that we're involved in are in these chat rooms with folks that actually had children at Camp Mystic or La Junta or other ones of these camps. And then folks that are trying to support them, folks that are really deeply affected at all kind of levels. And so we began just to ask, what are questions that are coming up for people? And for the last 3 or 4 days, folks have just been texting us, and we've been compiling these questions that are kind of emerging out of these text strains, and parents have gotten in touch with us as well. And so I'm just going to go down the list and ask these questions and let y'all respond to them. Before I do that, we've asked if you would spend about 5 minutes just kind of talking to us about some resources or what's on your heart, some of the top of the mind things that we should be thinking about and helping us frame this time. And so, Donna, I'm going to start with you and ask.
Right. Thank you. Well, it's hard to find anybody in our community who is not suffering in some way, who isn't affected by the loss that we're all experiencing due to the flood of the Guadalupe. Some of you may be suffering the loss yourselves. Maybe your neighbor's child isn't coming home from Camp Mystic. Maybe your cousin's teenager is missing still. Maybe it's a niece or someone you barely know, a friend of a friend. But all of us in some form have heard and felt the tragedy of what's happening. We are haunted by those that are still missing. I think that for some reason, this can trigger losses that you've had in your life before. And I think it's important for us to be aware of that. That if in your life you have lost your mom or your dad or a child or a best friend, a significant loss, this can take you right back to that place and make this even worse. I really like the grief and loss work of William Warden. And when I do workshops, I do a lot around his work. And he speaks to the importance of how a person dies, that the method of death is significant in our suffering. How a person dies is really significant in the way that we're going to grieve. And Warden says that if the loss is sudden, if it is unexpected, if it is unfathomable, if it is too soon, if it defies what we think is the right thing, then it makes it harder for us to suffer through those. It makes the grief process more complicated and harder to do. When an 8-year-old dies at camp, things are not right. We can't wrap ourselves around that. So our losses that we're suffering from this past week's Guadalupe experience, whether it's Camp Mystic or the other camps or the campers on the side of the river for 4th of July, I think it's hurting especially hard because it was sudden. It was unexpected. It is unfathomable. It's too soon. It defies all what we think is right. What I think has made this terribly hard tragedy even worse is that we're experiencing it over and over and over again every day still. A car wreck is tragic enough, but it's over, and you can begin to try to heal soon afterwards. This is still in play. We are still finding folks, and we will for a while. And I think that puts us in a place where we can't start to heal because every day we see another camper found, another couple or grandparents found. Now, I don't want to minimize the loss of your 95-year-old dad one bit. It's terribly hard to lose your dad at 95 at any age. But there's something teeny bit about it being a natural death and an expected death at 95 that helps you along that grieving process, hopefully. This is not that. So how do we get through this? Are we going to feel this way for a month? Is it going to last a year? How do we talk to our kids about this? So I would like to offer to you, yes, we are going to get through it. And I think it's love and communication is what I find is going to help us. Cry, write, and talk. When I talk to clients about grief, I give them homework. And the homework is cry, write, and talk. It is so important to cry. And when I'm seeing boys in my practice, I say, if you're too cool to cry, cry in the shower. You're wet anyway. I think it's so important to cry. Now, some people say, I can't even cry, and that's fine. It'll come. But when it does come, when you feel that frog in your throat, cry. Write. If you can journal, if you can write at the top of the page, I feel so yucky. I don't understand why I feel this bad, and keep writing. If you can say, I'm so ticked off, and keep writing. If you can't do that, if you write your favorite poem, write it down on a piece of paper. You can write a song on a piece of paper. Writing, the research says that physically writing something on a piece of paper helps cellular growth. It helps us to heal. They say typing isn't quite as good, but typing is better than nothing. Talking, it's so important to talk. Find a trusted, loving person that you can talk with and that you can really share your pain with. And we cry, write, and talk to purge the pain. We're getting it out. We're not letting it stuff and fester inside us. We're purging the pain. cry, write, and talk. So when you're hurting so bad, how on earth do you help your child? So how do we talk to our kids about this, particularly adolescents? I have 4 helpful hints for you. One is to talk. They need to talk. You need to talk with them and see where they are. Process this with your adolescents, with your teenagers. Meet them where they are. Do not give them any more detail than they're asking for. Sometimes we just think the more we talk and we're nervous, we're just going to gab and gab. That's not helpful. Meet them where they are and answer the question they ask. Make sure you're not meeting your needs by talking with them. When you're talking with them, don't meet your needs. You're listening. Listen, listen, listen. And remember, it's okay not to have the answer.
Thank you,
That's
Don.
me.
Appreciate you. Michelle?
I think it's really challenging. You did a wonderful job of talking about how everyone is impacted, and that's so true. And I think you made an important point about dealing with your own grief, and I think that's particularly important as parents are trying to help their children. You need to make sure that you are helping yourself. You really can't fully help your children if you are not in a space to where you have your needs met. And I think with kids, it's a little different. Some of the things are the same, creating the time and the space. As you said, the grief process, this is going to be long, it's going to be arduous, it's not going to be over in a month, or it's going to be a very long time. And I dare say most of us are not even in the grief process yet because we're still in the trauma. And for younger children whom this has sadly affected, a great number of young children who've lost friends, who've lost siblings, families who's lost children, neighbors. And how do we help young children grapple with things that we don't have any idea how to grapple with? And I think the important thing is that we don't have an answer. There's not a right answer to this. It's about being available, creating safe spaces, and allowing your children to express themselves in whatever way they need. Sometimes there are some children who can articulate really well and who can ask their questions, who can pose those questions, who want to talk about it. And there are going to be some who are going to shut down. They're not going to want to talk about it. They're not going to know how to talk about it. It doesn't mean that they're not processing it. And so you still need to create the space. And I think for very young children, physicality is really important. So creating spaces for physical activity that expels feelings out of your body. So running, climbing, jumping, swimming, trampolines, sand, any of those kind of things. So young children process information. They're very visceral. All trauma is really held in the body, but for young children, they need to disperse that. And so they need ways to do that. And so I think keeping a routine is really important. We say boredom is a great tool for creativity, but when you're in a situation like this, lots of downtime is not necessarily a great thing. I'm not saying you want to keep them in activities back to back to back. I am saying you want to create safe spaces, but within that, do you want to play ball? Do you want to play a board game? How about we, go build with your Legos? Create spaces to be with. Being with is the most important aspect. Your presence as a parent or caregiver or aunt or uncle or sibling to a young child is really what's important, is being with them. Because left alone with lots of big, overwhelming feelings that kids don't know what to do with, they get overwhelmed very easily. And so creating lots of space and time to be with your kids, I think, is really critical. The other thing for young children is turn off the news, turn off the media. They do not need to see this. It can create nightmares for kids to see houses flowing down rivers and these kind of things. Young children do not need to see that, and they don't need to overhear lots and lots of conversations with lots of details about what has occurred. They need a general sense of what's occurred, and I think you do need to be honest, but don't flood them with details of information that's going to be hard for them to process. So cut down the media as much as you can so that they don't have access to that, and appropriate conversations with them. And because their little antennae are very attuned to you, make sure if you're having difficult conversations, adult conversations, that they're really not listening into that. But be reassuring to them. I mean, if they want to know what has happened in general sense, you want to be honest about what's happened, and then you want to ground them in the present. You are safe. Right now, in this space, you are safe. And being with. So, and I know we've got questions, so I'm going to kind of caveat and let's move to those.
That sounds like really good words for adults too. Thinking just about doom scrolling with some. So I want to get right into this question because it's one that keeps coming up in some of the circles. How do you explain the sudden death of a child to small children, while also reassuring them that they are safe? And I wonder if we can take that to children and then also adolescents.
With small children, I think it's, again, you want to be honest. They've heard, or they're going to hear on the playground, their friends, their cousins, somebody's going to tell them. And it is always better that it comes from a parent. It creates the trust with the parent that you're going to be there and you're going to tell me the truth, even the hard truths. And so you be honest. And you say that it happened. And then you say that this is not usual. This is not typically how it happens. Usually people live a long time, and children don't usually die when they're 8 or 9 or 15 or 18. Usually that doesn't happen. It can happen, and it does happen, sometimes in tragic ways and sometimes in other ways. So you can't say that it'll never happen again. You can't say that, because they know better and you know better. But letting them know that it is unusual. People have gone to camp for hundreds of years and come home happy and had wonderful experiences. This is an anomaly. This isn't what usually happens. And again, back to grounding, you are safe. Mommy and Daddy are here. Aunt Joe is here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your people are here. And we're going to do everything that we can to keep you safe, like we always do. Again, back to routines and the kind of typical things that help ground kids is always a positive thing to do, to have routines and something to do. Right now it's summer, so routines are a little off. And so maybe you need to kind of create some routines right now until schools get started again, and make a plan for the week. Here's what we're going to do. So it helps them know what's coming, what to look forward to. I'll punt to adolescents.
I certainly agree with all of that. I think for adolescents, one thing they tend to do is isolate. from parents in particular. I think sometimes they gather with their friends, which is good to have that support. But as a parent, I would not allow them to isolate totally. I might let them go in their room for 15 or 20 minutes and allow them that, but then I would pester them to get out and talk. I think it's important that they talk. I think it's important that they process. They're thinking about it, they are processing it, and I think we need to know how they're processing it and what they're thinking. Hiding from it does not help. Their imaginations can get out of hand. It can become worse than it really is pretty quickly, and sometimes with friends that happens too. So I, again, just suggest conversation and not allowing them to isolate too much.
Thank you. How do you help kids regain a sense of safety after these kinds of things? And even maybe there's so many of the folks probably in this room too that are experiencing secondhand trauma in a sense, right? They're holding space for friends in their community, for folks that have been deeply affected this. It's somewhat removed. But even the folks that we're supporting, they're standing closer to this than we are. How do you help, when somebody asks, how do you help them regain a sense of safety in their family, in their life?
I've seen a couple of people this week who've been terribly affected by this flood, and a lot of them have said, is it going to happen again? You know, and especially with all the rain we're having.
Yeah, sure.
Is it going to happen again? How do we know it's not going to happen again? Will I ever get to go to camp again? I'm never going back. Or can I go back? Or there's just this insecurity that is so present right now. There are questions we don't have answers to. And they're used to getting answers, right? They're used to having questions, and here's the answer. And it's hard for all of us when we don't have those answers. But I think the sense of security of family and friends, I know that of a group of kids from camp got together yesterday. And the parents were wondering, is that a good thing? Should we do that? Absolutely, And a counselor was actually with them, and they all got together again. And I think being together again and having each other to lean on helps that security, help build that security and that safety.
That's great.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's important that the daily routines continue, that you still do the things that you normally do in your everyday life. So we're still going, to the grocery store together. We're still going, to grandma's house. We're still going to do these things. It's not that this thing has occurred and everything shuts down, because it really is in community, together. Yeah. That's how all of us get through something like this. And that is a beautiful example to young children. Rather than isolating and shutting down, we open up and we come together. And we create those safe spaces, whether that's just getting together for, a barbecue or, hanging out and playing games together, being with other people. I think that that helps not only the kids, but the grown-ups as well.
I think that's so true. I think one of the good things that you can see coming out of this is us. Look, we're all right here together. And look how many people are affected. Folks that don't even know children at Camp Mystic or along the river. People are so affected by other people's losses. And that just shows how much we love and how much we care. And I just, that's the cool part about in a tragedy, our all coming together is so necessary.
Yeah. There's a buddy of mine that lives in a neighborhood that's adjacent to this, was walking the other day and passed a father who was just weeping. Oh. And he didn't know this man, but they stood, he said, in the middle of their neighborhood and their street and hugged each other. And one of the questions that someone asked is, how do you not transfer your loss onto your kids? Is it how much do you show? What do you not show? Do you try to go find somebody in the neighborhood to hug it out with in the middle of the street? I mean, how do you do this? What's the way forward in our grief with our children?
You want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this in the podcast. I think we touched on this briefly, that it's okay for your kids to see you upset. It's okay for your kids to see you sad. It's okay for your kids to see you cry. Now, there's a balance, and if you are just wiped out, undone, and uncontrollable, probably they don't need to see that. But to see you sad or crying or reaching out to your friends or your family, that's a fabulous model for kids, that emotions don't kill us. Emotions occur, and they're strong and they're powerful, and then they change. They do change. And we do feel better. Crying, like you said, crying and writing, and yes, those things make us feel better. They're cleansing. This is what it means to be human. And so being a human model in front of your children is a very powerful and good thing, and showing them how expressing your emotion is a good thing. Like I said, there's a balance, especially for young children. If you're completely distraught, then that will create some worry for them. Is mommy okay? Is daddy okay? And so you want to reassure them, if they are around people who are distraught, that they're going to be okay. They are really, really sad. They're beyond sad. And they will be okay right now, and then maybe direct them somewhere else. But it's okay for your kids to see you cry and to be upset, because it's upsetting.
I would definitely agree with that with teens. I think it's so validating for them for you to say, I'm having a really hard time. Are you having a hard time? How are you doing this? And I think it's really neat for teenagers, adolescents to see that their parents are real people. We have real feelings too. And there can be a real connection there between mom and dad and teenager that might not be there in a lot of places, that you can share this experience together and hold on to each other and know that there's validation and there's connection there. And I think that's really valuable.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's neat for kids to see us cry, and it makes us real.
I also wonder, too, if this is an opportunity for us thinking about, just as adults, for us to take some inventory about, often the older we get, our friends group can kind of get more thin. And I wonder if this is also a time to reevaluate the necessity to have our own friend groups to be able to cry in. And to be able to have adults that might contain and bear witness to the profound feelings that we have around this loss as well. I think that's important.
That's a good point to bring up.
So knowing that that loss and grief often can, it taps into a deep anguish, and how do we know as parents what's kind of like normal grief, if there is, right? And how do we know if we may need some more help? Right? This may be something that we need to have some more resources for. So how do you navigate that and see those tea leaves,
I think it's about functioning myself. I think for teens, I had someone call me this week and say, we had a plan for this week, and I've taken off work because my teenager's not doing very well. And do I make them go to what the plan was, another activity in town, or do I stay home with this child? What is the best thing for me to do with my teenager? And I said, I think you ought to stay home. If that's your gut feeling that you need to stay home with your child, I think that support you can provide is great. And I would try to process what's going on, and I would also try to do something fun. Not rip-roaring, nobody feels rip-roaring right now, but something, playing a game or going to a movie or something fun. And she ended up staying home from work 2 days with her teenager to support that. But her teenager has talked and is better, and she really wanted to stay home today, but she needed to go to work, so she didn't. But I would say I wouldn't be so concerned about that teenager, because she is talking, she's processing with her mom, and she knows her mom's right there with her. If your child goes in their room and shuts the door and will not process, if your child starts to get sick, if your child is really angry and lashing out and fighting or knocking a hole in your wall, those are definite signs that I would get help. And it doesn't have to be that bad. You know your child. If your child is not doing well after 2 or 3 days of trying to be there, I would seek help.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is about functioning. If your daily functioning is impaired, then that's when, probably seeking some assistance. And parents know their children better than anyone. And so a parent's intuition is really good stuff, and it's pretty spot on. So as a parent, if you feel ill-equipped, or if you feel like you've tapped out and you don't know what to do next, I think at least seeking some guidance for yourself might be a place to start, and if not for your child. But if a child's really struggling, then absolutely, there's help, and certainly you can get it. Look for changes in things like eating and sleeping patterns. If you see big behavior shifts that are, unusual for your child, those are kind of signs that things may be a bit awry and they may be overwhelmed. Those are kind of telltale signs generally. If you have, they can't sleep, or they're waking up with nightmares, or they're not eating, or they're eating all the time, or those kind of things. Any of those kind of functioning shifts are kind of signs to pay attention to.
Good. We live in such an interconnected, community, not just in this area, but it just feels like, everyone has been touched by this. Some of the questions that are coming up, or how do we, if we're at HEB and we see folks that we know who have lost a child, what do we say to them? What do our kids say to someone who's lost their brother or sister? Do we give them space? I mean, what do we do? And so there's a lot of questions and anxiety around that, particularly I think as we head back to school, and there's more of a regular rhythm. One of the mothers asked, "What do I say in carpool line?" There's 3 kids that are in a friend group together, and 6 of them, 3 of them didn't come back. What do we do? And so, how would you begin to respond?
I think for right now, in the present, in the next week or two, I would just say, I care. I'm thinking about you. I love you. And hug. Because it's so raw right now, folks may not want you to ask, how are you? They just leave me alone. They probably aren't in HEB, to tell you the truth.
Right.
But, I think it's
be.
important to let them guide you on conversation. And about carpool line, another month has gone by. Obviously, you have to address it. If you're in carpool with 6 people and 6 children and 3 are missing or gone, then I would call that mom beforehand and say, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. Would you like to visit? I'm here if you want to talk about it. We're, to say the truth, we're devastated for you,
Yeah, I think it's hard to know what to say with any loss or death, but in a situation like this, it kind of transcends language and words. And again, I think it comes back to presence, and sometimes a simple gesture, just to place a hand and say nothing, or to say, I'm sorry, or I'm here, to reach out in that way. And I think that's much more powerful than to try to offer an explanation, or your idea of, the why. I think just being present, and saying, I'm here, call me anytime. For children, I think about situations where, a sibling may have passed and yet the other sibling is still there, and then the friend group gets together and the one is missing. And I think it's okay to give kids permission to talk about their friend who's no longer here. And I think that depending on how the sibling of the child may react, and for parents to prep your child to say, we're gonna go over to so-and-so's house, and usually when we go, there are 4 kids there to play, and as you know, there's only going to be 3 kids, and when we get there, let's be sensitive to so-and-so's brother or sister who's still here, and maybe ask if they want to talk about their sibling who's no longer here. And they may say yes, and they may say no. And if they say yes, then you may say, tell them the things you're remembering about them, or remembering a fun time you had with them. And if they say, no, I don't want to talk about it, then let's respect that. So to kind of prep your kids, depending on their age, obviously, but just prepping them a little bit beforehand, before they walk into the situation, to think about. Again, we go back to that executive functioning, that young children aren't kind of thinking ahead in that same way. So preparing them for what they might expect from, the parent. They might, these kids might walk in and the mother or the father may break down in tears because suddenly they're overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, she's not here anymore. And so to tell your kids that could happen, and it's not about you. This is about where she's feeling in her heart and she's missing, so-and-so who's not here.
And I think about, I'm just really glad to be in Spring Branch and the school system that we have here and the care. I mean, the amazing care and the administration. And I'm wondering about parents as they're going back to school, dads, moms. What can we do as folks that love these people? How do we bear witness, be a part of that container that holds that space as school starts back up? What can we do as a school system, as a community of people that just, whether we run into them or not, know that that's taking place?
I think it's a good idea if you know the families well enough that mom would not be shocked that you called. I think if you know the families, that it would be a great idea to try to get kids together before school starts, so that the first time they see someone who's lost a sister or a brother or getting carpool without 3 people, then it would be better to have that experience beforehand and get together and just talk and be together. You can always, I'm a big rock painter. I'm a big believer in getting river rocks and painting, and then you can keep that rock And it'd be a neat group activity for these kids, no matter how old they are, to paint rocks in memory of your friends. And it can be a flower, it can be a heart, it can be whatever they want. But just that activity of doing that to honor that missing child or children or teens would be meaningful. I love balloon launches too, though it's not as PC as it was. But, you know, I love blowing up helium balloons or having them blown up and write messages and let them go to heaven. I think it's really neat to have activities together before school starts so that first day, it helps it not be so weird and hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think ritual is important, even for kids, to have some way to hold on to that memory of their friend or their sibling. And so, yes, collages, painting rocks, any kind of arts and crafts, again, going back to that kind of sensory experience for kids, but helping them remember. And I think that's something you can say to kids is, your friend isn't here anymore. And we can remember all the wonderful things that we loved about her and the things that she loved. And again, it's part of the human experience. And I think bringing children into that process is really important.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to say their name.
Yes.
That we're not hiding from it. It's not something taboo or terrible. And it helps when we talk about them because it brings them back to us, first of all. It makes us sad, but it also honors that person, I think.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. I wonder, John, if we have any questions from the text. Do you want to?
So I've got a few, and I'll just, there's about 6 or so y'all keep that in mind as you think about how long you take in answering, but I'm going to try to prioritize them. The one that came up that I think is probably the most helpful right now in context of what you're asking is for those young children with anxiety issues, deeply feeling children, what changes to the approach would you suggest making? My young child's mind can and does often latch on to ideas and run with them.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
So, we live in a time where anxiety disorders are skyrocketing, even for young children. And so the addition of something like this to a person who's already struggling with anxiety can feel very overwhelming. So I would go back to some basic kind of CBT work, even with very young children, is centering and grounding in the moment. So if they're spinning off, take a look. I want to take your shoes off, and I want you to put your feet on the floor. I want you to count. Take your big toe. Now let's go to the next toe, and the next toe, and the next toe, and the next toe. Now I want you to squeeze your arms, squeeze your lemons, and get all the juice running out. So get them in their bodies in this moment, right here, right now. You are safe. You are not in danger. Your family is here. We are in our safe home. We are in a safe place. And then try to get them involved in some kind of bodily experience. And then even simply saying, okay, I want you to look around. I want you to 5 things that you can see in this room right now. Oh, okay, there's a bird out the window. Okay, oh, yep, you're right. There's a big paint mark on that wall. So have them look around. What can you see? Okay, name 4 things you can hear. What can you hear right now? Can you name something you can taste right now? Because when your brain is occupied, it can't be dually occupied. So if I'm moving into this moment and I'm thinking and looking around me and naming things, then I'm moving out of that part of the brain that's kind of spinning in anxiety. So just bringing them back, bringing them into their body, and then again, doing things that have rhythm, whether that's rocking or singing or tossing a ball back and forth. Any of those kind of things that are soothing rhythms when you think about rocking a baby to sleep, that motion, that rocking motion, how that's soothing and comforting, providing those kind of experiences, just helping them to move out of that space where they're cycling and spinning. And for those kids who really are suffering with anxiety, and it probably warrants them getting some assistance if they're really kind of spinning out.
I would say for teens, validating, hopefully, we know that you have some anxiety issues. We know that you tend to get anxious. This will be a time where it will seem worse to you. This will be a time where you will really feel more anxiety probably, and that's normal. That will be okay. Separating, this didn't happen to you. Similar to going into your body, and for a child to be grounded is, we are fine. We're sitting here eating supper together, and we're all together, and this didn't happen to us. It is so sad that it happened to someone else, and we are so sorry. And maybe we want to do something for them. What can we do? Let's brainstorm together. But we're fine. We're safe. We're secure. And again, processing out loud together. And then, of course, if it isn't working, seek help.
Another question is, my 18-year-old lost a friend. How do I respond when she says she doesn't want to talk about it?
Mm-hmm. That's very normal. She's a good old normal teenager. And I think that's okay for a short while. I think you say to her or him, is it her? Do we know? Her.
Yeah, her.
I think we say to her, I understand this is horrific. Try to validate how horrible this is for her. I can imagine that this is really tough for you. And I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you. I will travel this path with you. You take the time you need, and then I'd love to visit with you about it. I'd love for you to tell me how you're doing and see how that works. I would not let her isolate long, not days and days. And I understand she's processing. She needs time to process it. She's telling you that, and that's fine. I would keep interjecting how I felt, and that you feel, I hope you're doing better today. Is there anything I can help you with? For me, it seems a little harder today, but the more it sinks in, are you feeling that way? Would you like to talk about that?
Michelle, this one is specifically about children. How important is it to use gentle but direct language with speaking to children about death? For example, using language like she died rather than she went to be with Jesus or God took her to heaven.
I think it is always critical that we tell children the truth. We think children can't handle the truth, and the reality is children absolutely can handle the truth. Yeah. And when we talk in euphemisms and we dance around things that we find too difficult, that we don't want to say, that's really more about us than it is about them.
That's good.
We need to be honest with children. And I think we need to say that she died. She's no longer alive on this earth. I think that is an important thing. It's not like, she's going to come back, that this is what death means. Death means that her body, we can't see her and touch her and feel her and talk with her anymore. And so I think that's really important, depending on your faith background, and of course you can overlay that as well. But I think it really is important to be honest with kids, Death is something that we all, as humans, struggle with. And so talking to young children about death is hard for us as adults. But I think it's really important that we are honest with children and tell them the truth, always.
You know, I think if you are faith-based, yeah, I love to bring God into everything. And if you're used to doing that, I think I have, my 10-year-old granddaughter knows lots of people who were at camp, and 2 good friends, and fortunately they came home. But she's very inquisitive about, what about these girls that didn't come home? What, they died. They went, and we talked a lot with her about God is with them in every second through the experience. God was with them, helping them, and that they are in heaven. And I think if that's your belief, I think that's a beautiful way to help them process something that none of us understands fully.
The next question is from a teacher. How can teachers in the community navigate incoming students' grief and support them in the classroom appropriately?
Boy, as if we haven't asked enough of our teachers already. Yeah, it's a really, really important job. Being a teacher is being so much more than a teacher. And I think, again, it's about creating a safe space for kids. Now, a teacher is not a therapist, nor they don't need to be, but I think they do need to create an environment that acknowledges, particularly if the school and this grade has lost children, I think ignoring it and not talking about it is just not an option. So I think teachers need to acknowledge that we've lost a friend. We've lost a friend who's not here with us anymore. And if anybody, whatever, at the beginning of school, if anybody would like to, work on a project, if we'd like to create a collage of memories, of words that we remember about this person, that we can put it on the wall in our classroom, and then we'll remember, and she'll be here with us in our hearts. And if anybody's really upset about it and really feels like they need some help, then you can talk to me, and then we can talk to the counselor, or we can talk with your mommy and your daddy or whoever else, and kind of offer support in that way. But I think to acknowledge that there's been loss and that we've all been impacted by it is an important thing in building that new kind of classroom environment.
Unfortunately, teachers are going to have to acknowledge it, I think. But they're very often not equipped, and that's very difficult.
Another question is, if our children do not know personally those affected, they may not be on social media, they may not be aware of what's happened, should we still share with them what happened, and what level of devastation do we share?
Again, I'm going to default to always tell children the truth. They're going to know. I mean, I had a call that said, we hadn't really talked about it, but the babysitter, the kid was in the car and said, "Why are all those ribbons?" And the babysitter said, "This is what happened." So they're going to hear about it.
Yeah.
The community's too tight. They're a friend of a friend of a friend. They're going to hear it. It is best that it comes from you. It needs to come from parents. That's my bias. That's my opinion. I'll own that for what it is. But I think it needs to come from parents, because children need to know that they can come to you and you are going to tell them the truth, no matter what. And they need to know that you are their most trusted source. And so I think you absolutely tell them, this is what happened. Here's what you might see. You might see ribbons on trees. You might hear conversations. You might hear people talking about it. You might see people crying. You might see friends of friends of friends or cousins of friends that are upset. And this is why they're so upset. I would give them the basic, here's what happened. There was a terrible flood. Children and grown-ups and lots of people lost their lives in this flood. And that's why there's lots and lots of sadness. If you have questions, let me know.
You spoke on this a little bit, but someone asked, what should we be careful not to say to our friends that have lost loved ones in this tragedy? You mentioned just saying, I care about you, and like if you were to see them in public, but what are to be careful not to? I know as a pastor, a lot of times people mean well, they love people, and they will say things that are horrible theology or platitudes that don't come out right. I usually just tell people to say, I'm so sorry and I'm here, anything that I can do. Is there anything else that you would say not to say to people?
You know, something that is surprising to me that I hear in my grief group that we do here is people say, we talk often about what people say to us and how hurtful it can be. And people do mean well. But I can see in this instance, somebody may say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you lost so-and-so. At least you have so-and-so and so-and-so left. That happens a lot when there's a loss of a child. A lot of times people say, well, at least you have somebody left, you know. And they mean well, but that's a terrible thing to say. That would be the biggest thing I think of, John.
Yeah, less is more. Yeah. Always in these situations. You don't know that person's background, their history. You don't know what's happening in their lives. And when you don't know, don't make assumptions. And so if you want to acknowledge, then I think, John, what you just said is a great thing to say, I'm so sorry. And that's enough. That's enough.
You kind of spoke on this too. The question was, how do you navigate the national media stories of your family's tragedy?
Yeah. Yeah, these families, this experience has put people front and center, and that's, again, probably not where they want to be. And so I think, from my perspective, is erring on the side of extraordinary respect for wherever these people are, what they're doing. If you want to offer a condolence, then I think that's fine. But if you're not close with this person, you're not in their circle, you're not part of, their group, then I think a condolence and I'm sorry is enough. And then, do the things that we can do, give to the food bank, give to the people who are collecting. I mean, in whatever way, participate, but create space and boundary for people to do what they need to do in an unfathomable amount of grief and despair that you really don't need to step into that if it's not part of your circle, is my kind of thinking on that.
I thought of one more thing that is often said that really is not a great idea, and that is to go up to someone and say, oh, I know how you feel. I know how you feel. I lost, You don't know how. None of us knows how anybody else feels at this loss, and so, or any loss. So that's another thing I would steer away from.
All right, so two other real quick ones, and then we did get a why question, which I prefaced at the beginning. I'm not going to put our therapists,
Thank you.
Our psychologists and our therapists in the position of the why question. I would say if you have a why question, we've got pastors here at the end of the service, and any of us would be glad to talk to you about the why questions, or at least wrestle with those with you. I don't want anyone to think that we're disregarding any questions. But there were two. One is like, are there any children's storybooks that you know of or recommend that help create space to talk through grief? And the other one, so that was with children. The other one was a teenager who broke down, who was a counselor in our camp here where we had a child. So they don't know children personally, but they know of them. And it triggers stuff in adolescence that causes them to have a breakdown just because they're aware of all the trauma and the pain that's going on. So what are resources for adolescents who are older as well? Where can we direct them if their parents really aren't involved, but the teenager has been involved? So one is like storybook for children. The other is resources for adolescents if they are carrying a lot of this grief, even though they may not be personally connected to it.
There's a really good book published by the American Psychological Association called A Terrible Thing Happened. It is a nondescript. It never says what the thing was that happened, and that's a good resource, I think, for children. There's a couple of books that were written around Harvey, flood books and those kind of things. I don't know, I haven't looked at those recently, so I don't know that those would be appropriate, but A Terrible Thing Happened is probably a good book to read with young children.
I think that for adolescents needing support when it really didn't happen to their family is what you're saying. So this teenager had campers that are now gone.
Yeah, it sounds as if the teenager is loosely connected, knows that campers at VBS and Camp Chapelwood, and so they kind of had a breakdown, and it may be manifesting some of their own stuff, but what are resources you could point teenagers to?
I would think having a teen support group would be really great to find. I'm happy to facilitate one of those if we want to do it here, but I think it might be a really good idea to have an adolescent support group where whether or not it's your family or a camper or you're affected, and I think that would be so beneficial. That I just think groups are magical, and you find out you're not alone in the world, and someone else is feeling similar to the way you are, and you can feel safe to visit about that. Also, I think Bo's Place is a great place. If you don't know about Bo's Place, it's a great place. It's a grief and loss center for children and adolescents, and that it's BO''S, Bo's Place. You could call them.
All right.
Thank you. Y'all, thanks for being here tonight and for participating. We've recorded this. This will be available. This is hopefully the start, not the finish of resources. My hope is that we'll be able to get some resources from both Donna and Michelle and put those together and have those also available, whether those are books or articles or movies, things that might be helpful as we walk through this as a community together, and as we head into the fall. We'll continue just to be providing resources together. So
yeah. Thank you all for coming tonight. What we want to do is, we've learned here at Chapelwood that lingering is good ministry, and that sometimes you just need community, you just need to linger. So we invite anyone who'd like to linger here in the sanctuary. We have pastors from Memorial Drive and from Chapelwood. We have staff. We also have Stephen ministers who are here. We'll kind of hang out. Then also in the fellowship hall, if you'll go right out this door and follow along, we'll have some people directing you. I know we've got some crisis counselors, some SBISD folks, so if you'd like to go and just kind of pick brains and see what are we thinking about as far as maybe school starting back or those sorts of things, or maybe you want to talk to someone, you just feel free to hang out and visit as you'd like. And if you have any questions for any of us, we will just be around for a little bit and be glad to meet with you. And Michelle and Donna, thank you so much again for being here. I know they may linger for a little bit as well. So just ask that as we end, we'll just kind of keep it more quiet in this room for people who may want to stay and pray. If you want to just come and pray by yourself here at the altar, we invite you to do that. And then the others of us will move out this door into the fellowship hall that way. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for just being with us. for providing resources and people who can help us to navigate very difficult topics and situations. Lord, more than anything, we want to know how to take the next right step. We're going to have a lot more questions. We're going to struggle with a lot of those. We're going to wrestle. We're going to be angry. We're going to be sad. And I just pray, God, that you would just be with us. Be with us and help us to sense your presence through this. As Thomas Merton said many years ago, that when we suffer for no purpose, it's meaningless. But if we go through the suffering together, if we go through it in community, and if we go through it with you, that it can be redeemed. There can be redemption, there can be hope, and there can be healing. So, Lord, if nothing else, just don't let us isolate. Let us stand together best we can, and let us wrestle with this as we go forward into the days and months and years ahead. We pray in the name of Christ. Amen. Amen. God bless. Go in peace.